So, good morning. We've had a very interesting morning. We seem to always have business meetings on Monday, so we're always quite rushed. But we've had good news that apparently we do have some viewers out there who are watching this.
Yeah.
Which means we're not talking to the void, which is always great to hear. So yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to mention it now or later. We can always re-mention it, but we won't be doing an episode next week because Samara is on holiday. So
I am.
I mean, I should be on holiday, but I'm not. So I thought this week we could do some stories about parenting, because obviously it is quite hard when you've kind of got an autistic child. It's hard raising children anyway, at least I assume so. But it's really hard, especially if you have multiple children who have autism, because we're all kind of different in our own way. So I thought parenting was the way to go. So story one, this was one I have read to you, but I found it quite funny. Am I the horrible person for not punishing my autistic son when he asks people if he wants them to lie? So my son is 15 and very blunt. If you ask him a question and he tells the truth, it's never something I've tried to correct because I don't necessarily think it needs correcting. However, it's really upset some family members. The biggest thing recently was that my brother and his wife are having a baby, and she mentioned wanting to name the baby Michaeli Anna Lee, which is a mouthful, and she then asked our opinions. My son told her it was spelt very weird and he didn't like it. She got very upset and started crying. I don't personally think he did anything wrong. She asked a question and got an answer. He kind of shrugged it off and said he wanted to go home, so we went home. That annoyed them even more. There's been a few tidbits of people asking about clothes and hair, and he's always honest. With the whole baby thing, everything seems to be so much more tense, and because of that, now whenever somebody asks a question, he asks them if he wants them to lie or not, because they don't like this either. I contacted by my brother, telling me I need to discipline my son when he's rude, and to teach him that being truthfully kind and being truthful are different. I'm not really sure how you explain that one to an autistic person. I disagree. He realizes they're getting upset, so he now clarifies before he answers, and it's working out well for him. My husband definitely appreciates it a lot more. This has obviously devolved into a fight. Why wouldn't it with this family? Usually, arguments have at least some form of split, but this one, it's just me against them, which is making me second guess myself. Am I the horrible person? Where do we start with this one?
I know it's very difficult. I mean, usually you would want your children to tell the truth, and obviously, like with autism and with things being like very black and white and like the literal thinking, you can see why they would just tell the truth. And like the person said, it's a bit hard to explain to an autistic person that they don't have to tell the truth all the time. I don't know. It's really difficult, isn't it? Maybe they should just stop asking this kid questions if they don't want the answer.
Well, I do find that a bit interesting because OP said her son is 15. So, even if the brother's wife has only been there for a little while, surely this is not the first time you've realized he will tell the truth. So why they would ask a question about something so sentimental and important, like this is what I want to name my child, what's your opinion on it? I mean,
I just
even
wouldn't
if it was
ask
a normal name, if you want to name your kid that, you name your kid that. You don't need a 15-year-old's opinion on
But that's it. You wouldn't really ask any 15-year-old's opinion, whether they're autistic or not. Why do you want to know what a 15-year-old thinks of your baby's name?
And obviously, you weren't reading it. I was. So OP did write how this woman wants to spell the kid's name. All I can say is it's very American. Like, when you read it and you're like, okay. So, but if they're saying it's a really long, complicated name, they're probably going to nickname this kid something anyway, which just means what's the point? But I agree with OP saying it is hard. How do you teach somebody who maybe doesn't always understand social cues, what is right and what is wrong of when you're talking to somebody. You know, I mean, I know I've definitely said things and then seen their face and second guessed what I've said and thought, oh God, have I just said something really offensive or something? But it's
Yeah.
so hard to police until you kind of said it.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, 15-year-old, at what point do you say, okay, I can't really control what they say and what they don't say?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just, it is a really difficult one because, really, especially a boy of 15, you'd want them to tell the truth as much as possible. I mean, that's around the age that they start getting into trouble. Like, you want the truth out of them. So I wouldn't personally try and knock it out of them and just say to people, if you're going to get offended by having the answer, then just don't ask.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that the woman who's currently pregnant, hormones might be a bit high and running. And again,
Yeah.
why would you ask somebody's opinion on something that you've already kind of set your heart on? That is just asking
Yeah.
to be upset about somebody's opinion. But yeah, no, I just, the fact that the brother as well has said you need to discipline him for
Yeah.
what? Because
That's me.
he's just not going to understand what he's getting into trouble for. What do you
No.
discipline him for?
Yeah, exactly. So what were they rated as?
So this one was, they weren't the horrible person, which I totally agree with, because, you know, I yeah, I think sorry. I think if I was in this situation and that was my brother, I'd say, how about you sit my son down and you try and explain to him why it's wrong?
Yeah.
Because I think the brother has said, kind of thought, oh, it'll be really easy to tell him off and he'll
Yeah.
understand straight away. Oh God. This cold has still not left
Oh
me.
no.
I think I'm getting better, and then I'm like, oh no. But yeah,
No.
no. So I saved some of the comments from this one. Somebody said basically what I've just said. What does your brother think you're going to be able to say to get him to change his mind? I totally get that. Again, another one that you said. Why did your sister-in-law ask if she was going to get so offended? I mean, what can you say when you're opening your opinion to get somebody's, like, you know, advice on it?
Yeah.
You can't always know what they're going to say, and it might not be your opinion,
Yeah,
but you know, you're
exactly.
kind of going to pick up and move on. I think what I find so strange about this is it's a grown woman upset over something that a 15-year-old boy said, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's weird.
I go to college and I'm on the bus with 18-year-olds and they behave like they're 5, so I don't know what she was
Yeah.
expecting from a 15-year-old. At that point, it's like, just, he could have said a lot worse. But yeah, and then, so on this second story, there are quite a few updates. It got me a little bit angry, I will say that.
Oh
So
no.
this one is, am I the horrible person for hiding my daughter's autism from her?
Oh.
Yeah, this one really did upset me because I was like, oh God, how can you do this? Anyway, so pretty much for most of our life, our daughter, 14 female, has had various issues. She had a speech delay, couldn't make eye contact, was extremely hyperactive, had trouble making friends, fidgeted a lot, and was extremely strict with rules and a whole bunch of other stuff. My wife and I suggested that she may be autistic, so we took her to a psychologist when she was 4. The psychologist diagnosed her with hyperactivity disorder, although we don't know if that coexists with her autism or if it was a misdiagnosis. From 8 to 11, we gave our daughter as much early intervention as possible. She'd been to behavioural and speech therapists. She was able to speak, but she did have a speech impediment. I'd given her various books on how to make and keep friends. At that point, she was a massive bookworm. We got her a place in a social class to help her build her social skills, but it wasn't until the end of her 4th grade, so about year 5, that she finally got diagnosed with autism. Her psychologist was excited to tell her, but my wife was against it. She wanted to wait until we felt our daughter was old enough to understand. We were aware of the stigma neurodivergent people experience, and she didn't want our daughter to go through that. So I agreed to hide it from her until she reached adulthood. This next part is extremely relevant. When our daughter got into 6th grade, so again, about year 7, she was bullied due to her autistic traits. She was gaslit, taken advantage of, and had many false friends who backstabbed her. It made our daughter very insecure about her poor social skills, and that was when she started to mask. It left her with such intense trauma that she still has triggers and is in therapy. Today, she came to us and asked, "What's autism?" We told her that it's a different way of thinking, and she was very confused because she didn't know we meant in the sense that autistic people have different brain chemistry from neurotypical. After we elaborated, she told us why she'd asked. She found out she was autistic. She apparently found some of her old medical records laying around and read them out of curiosity. She was upset and asked us how we could hide this from her. We tried to explain that we wanted to tell her when she was older, since we didn't want her to get hurt by people. She then angrily started yelling that she did get hurt anyway. She said all this time she thought there was something wrong with her, but if it weren't for us, she wouldn't have taken the bullying to heart and she would have felt differently. But instead, we made her pain worse. Now she's up in her room crying and refuses to speak to either of us. We're starting to wonder if we should have told her about her autism when we knew. It really does make me angry because that's such a big thing, and we've talked about it in the past, even like privately, that we agree that I'm a person with autism. It's not the first characteristic I want people to associate with me, but not because autism's bad, but because I have so many layers and complex, thoughts and feelings. But the fact that they didn't tell her, and she's now kind of distraught, going, well, I was hurt anyway because I didn't know why I was the weird one, why I stood out. And that really upsets me because I'm like, I couldn't imagine finding this out. And it's not like she's 14 years old, 14 at this point, and they didn't tell her. She found out by herself, and that's such a massive thing to find out, especially at that kind of age. But yeah, it really, really does make me angry. I don't know if maybe I would be on a different, side of opinion if maybe autism hadn't been around for most of my life. Like, I've been very open about it. But the fact that this girl's struggling and her parents have seen her struggling. I mean, I know by the time I was 14, I think I'd already had multiple suicide attempts at that point, and I don't mean to get dark, but, because I felt like I was the odd one out. But I knew I had autism. I knew, and I wasn't going to school because I was like, I don't fit in. I feel so uncomfortable. It's stressing me out. And it's interesting that her parents say it was only when she was about 8 to 11 that she started to mask. And I'm like, she's probably been doing it for a lot longer than that. But because she didn't know about her autism, and by the sounds of it, they don't know much about autism, they probably haven't noticed that this poor girl is struggling through this.
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad. Like, if you look at the implications that it's had on her mental health, like, that's very apparent. And we know people with undiagnosed autism, how badly their mental health is affected. And the fact that they knew, and she's now in therapy, like, that just says, like, this could be lifelong, that could be lifelong damage.
Exactly.
I think there is their answer. They were definitely in the wrong. They did the wrong thing, and there's no question about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So there was an update, which I think was supposed to make us less angry, but I feel if anything, it's just made me more angry. So, updated post. Her mother and I were completely in the wrong. At least they're aware of that now, because we should never have tried to hide an integral part of our daughter's identity. We thought we were protecting her, but only made it worse. I didn't know that it wasn't right at the time, but now I do. We come from a country where mental stuff isn't talked about. If anything, the person gets stigmatized for it. So we did our best to support our daughter with what we knew at the time. This isn't an excuse to our actions, but rather to explain them. A few hours after the original post, her mother and I had a long talk about it, reflecting on what we did wrong and what we should do to move forward. I gave her a space for a day or two before knocking on her door and asking if she wanted to talk to me about it. I apologised for what we did, telling her that we loved her no matter what, and promised that we would be better parents moving forwards. She says she understands that we were trying to do what we thought was best, but she felt so hurt that we kept things from her, especially given what has happened to her and how to find out from medical records of all things. She says that she isn't sure she could trust us for a while. Our daughter is still angry with us, although we understand why. At least she's on speaking terms with us again. We're doing our best to help our daughter through her journey of self-discovery at the moment. We've gotten her another therapist to help her understand more about herself, as well as to accept the past bullying. Her mother and I are also doing research about how autism works, and we are looking at getting her an IEP, which is the American version of kind of like an EHCP, at her school to give her access to accommodation. In addition to this, we took some of your advice, and her mother and I have been seeking therapy to better understand our autistic daughter, as well as family therapy. Thank you all for your judgment. Thanks for those who gave tips on how to support her moving forward. I feel extremely ashamed that I didn't realise sooner that I'd harmed our daughter. She seems happier now that she understands why she is the way she is. We fiercely love our girl, and we're lucky to have her. I think the reason why this has made me more angry is the fact that they knew she was autistic. They let her go through school knowing she was struggling with both friends and probably academically.
Yeah.
And they didn't try and get her the support she needed. Like, that's just insane to me. I like to think most parents, if they notice their child was struggling at school, the first thing they would be doing is, hey, okay, maybe not say to the school she has autism, although I don't know why you'd do that. Surely you would go to her teacher and say, hey, look, she's really struggling at this, or this. Is there any extra support you could give her? But they didn't. And the fact that they're saying they're only now researching more about autism to help her, that's like 14 years too late.
Yeah,
Like,
I personally, I kind of feel like, especially from the little bit they've said about the mum, I feel like it was more out of shame. I actually feel like they were ashamed that their daughter was autistic.
And the fact
they've
that
not accepted it.
Yeah, go on.
So they've not accepted it themselves. And that's why now they're like gone into panic mode, like, oh, we need to actually learn about it. You should have learned about it when you first thought she might have autism. You must have known enough about it to know that she might have, like, be on the spectrum. So
yeah, I find it quite insulting as well. I know that they've said they've come from another country, so I totally get different opinions and viewpoints, but calling autism mental stuff,
yes,
really, really, like, I'm angry, and
yeah.
I don't know these people, but I'm so angry. Imagine being told, oh, hey, you've got autism, it's mental stuff. It's like, it makes it sound like you're crazy or something, or it's something you can kind of control, or there's something wrong with your brain, and that's not how it works. That's, I like it. We've actually got a comment saying, by hiding it, she's probably also feeling like it's something to be ashamed of, which I think is so true. I mean, like we said, she's 14. She's becoming a very independent, her own person kind of at this point. They really needed to do this work like 10 years ago when they were suspecting that she might have something. And what I also don't like is they've said they've given her another therapist. So she's now got 2 therapists by the sounds of things. She's also being forced to go to family therapy. And it's like, this is just going to overwhelm this child who's now found something quite big about themselves out. And your automatic response is, hey, we're going to get you to go and talk to other people about it.
Just like throwing money at it, like hoping it'll go away.
Exactly. And I find it very interesting that the dad said, we've sent her to another therapist so she can accept the previous bullying. And I'm like, what? And then they're wondering why this 14-year-old girl has trauma that she's still reactive to. And it's like, by the sounds of it, you have not helped her. You've really let her out there to kind of suffer.
Yeah.
And like, the autistic community is very open, and we definitely welcome people coming in and learning more about things. But it actually kind of feels like a form of abuse that you've let her suffer for so long.
Yeah.
And the fact is, she's 14, so I know for a fact this girl has come home at least once crying about her friendship groups, or why doesn't she fit in, or why is she struggling so much. And how can you sit there knowing that, okay, it might be because she has autism? It feels like you're just sadistic watching her suffer, and I can't understand it. I really can't. And this is, I think, out of all the stories we've read, this is the only one that really, really gets me annoyed. Like, oh,
It's awful. It really genuinely is awful. Was there many comments about it?
yes, but some of them I can't read for language
Okay.
reasons. But most of them were very like, how could you do this to her? Because it's such a big thing. It's so much suffering, but they definitely got voted the horrible people in this situation.
Yeah, good.
I don't think there was any kind of redeeming quality, because even in their update, they still sound very much like autism is a bad thing. We don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And that is really scary. I mean, to think that this girl is probably still out there. She might be a bit older now, but she's probably still not going to 100% understand herself.
Yeah.
And she's, by the sounds of it, not from a family that is open and honest about it. And I mean, I know every family kind of has their own level of how much honesty kind of goes, into conversations, but this is really, I really feel sorry for this poor girl who's had to, it does upset me. It really does.
Yeah.
And I just, the fact that they've let her suffer in school, and they gave her books on how to make friends and keep friends. I'm like, what? So you knew she was struggling when she was a child in primary school.
Yeah.
And you didn't step in. And then she started like their version of secondary school, which gets even worse because, let's be honest, teenage girls can be very catty towards each other. So when you already feel like you don't fit in, it's just insane. It doubles. And
Yeah.
I know I keep saying it, but I can't imagine this poor girl going home and literally crying because she doesn't fit in and she just doesn't understand why. And the fact that they knew why, or at least, suspected why for a few years. People have autism, and like there's loads of parents who have 4, 5, 6-year-olds who have been diagnosed with it, and they've managed to do it. It's not like you have to sit your child down and say, this is what autism means via the Oxford Dictionary or something. You don't have to be that intense about it, but you do have to at least be a bit open of like, okay, hey, so maybe you don't think the same way other people think because you've got something that makes you different. And I don't like it when people say makes you special, because I feel like that sounds a bit offensive.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm special, am I? Great, fantastic. I totally want to hear that, And I think the thing is, they were quite selfish in the fact that they thought they were protecting her. And I don't think they thought they were protecting her. I think they thought they were protecting themselves.
Yeah, I don't think they
from
were
perhaps the
her.
stigma.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, on a lighter note, have you seen any TV shows recently that you've thought, oh my god, what is that?
Do you know what? I haven't recently, but I think like I actually try and stay clear of them now, especially after I can't remember we brought it up last week. I think we did briefly. I think the last one I watched was that Dating on the Spectrum or what I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, the Love on the Spectrum one.
Love on the Spectrum. And I think ever since then I've just avoided anything with like that's related to it because it just makes me really angry.
What I find very interesting is because I watch so many TV shows, which is probably really bad, but I can use the excuse I'm studying media. It's homework, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
the American versus British narrative of autism in TV shows is really, really different. Because I
Yeah.
find most American-based shows, because especially they did that American version of Love on the Spectrum, which is
Yeah.
reality compared to fiction. It feels very derogatory.
Yeah.
Whereas, or like atypical, it's their only personality trait. Other than that, they've got nothing. Whereas
Yeah.
I've recently been watching this TV show on BritBox, which was Professor T, which I think is ITV, and he's supposed to have OCD, but I definitely think he's got traits of autism. And they've had an autistic. I think they've had 2 autistic characters on that show, and it was actually really reassuring to see variety in the levels of autism, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because I feel like with American shows, it's very one line. That's it. There's no variation. There's no nothing that actually gives them texture as a person.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I saw another article about Love on the Spectrum, and I've said it before, but it's slowly coming out more that they don't pay these people very well for being on their show, and the conditions look really inhumane.
What?
And the fact that they're dealing with like sometimes people who have obviously very complex autism,
Yeah.
it just feels a bit horrifying. I mean, no,
It,
and I'm
no.
wondering if they've got anybody on like their cast or crew that's autistic that can
Yeah.
help these people, because otherwise it must feel so isolating.
Yeah. I think it's just the fact that these programs, they are making money off autism, but making money off making autistic people look like freaks. That is what is it's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, I find as well, like Criminal Minds, Dr. Spencer Reid definitely has some traits of autism, and I can kind of forgive them in the first couple of seasons because it was like, the mid 2000s, kind of earlier on, where things were still a bit, you can't say this, you can say that.
Yeah.
But then they had this kind of period where, because he had autistic traits, he seemed very vulnerable, and then he somehow got a drug addiction.
Oh.
And I felt like, just because he's supposedly a vulnerable person, I didn't really get that, but I definitely find that probably one of the better performances of somebody who's got autism on American TV. They
Yeah.
really, I don't really know the rules in America, because I know that in the UK we have many like agencies that have to police what goes through. So if things come across as offensive, you can make complaints and say, hey, I didn't like this, and
Yeah.
they will look into it and stuff. And they're definitely more TV shows, films have to pass this kind of testing quality. And I don't know if they have that in America, and I find that's probably why,
Yeah, I doubt
if
that
they
they do.
do, it's really, really strict. If
Yeah.
they don't want to rock the boat. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, okay, so we are coming to the end of our time again. I feel like it always goes really quickly, actually.
Yeah, it has.
Maybe it's because I was so angry this episode. I
Yeah.
don't know. But yeah, just a reminder, we won't be having an episode next week because Samara is off on her holidays, hopefully doing something very fun.
Hopefully.
So yeah, we will be back the week after, hopefully, unless something goes wrong. But yeah, we will see you then.